We're here today in central Oklahoma at Lake Thunderbird to investigate the role of evapotranspiration on the local environment. Today it's pretty sunny, it's about 80 degrees, and there's a slight breeze, so these conditions are ideal for producing significant evaporation and transpiration from the leaves of plants.
Evaporation is the process by which water changes phase between a liquid to a vapor. This can occur over land or water surface. It happens when thermal energy excites the molecules and they can escape to the free air above.
Transpiration is the process by which water is lost from a plant. A plant, when it's photosynthesizing, needs both carbon dioxide and water to photosynthesize. The carbon dioxide is drawn in through the leaf, through the open stomata you can see down here. And the water is drawn up from the soil through the roots and up to the leaf where the photosynthesis occurs. However, as the water is drawn up to the leaf, it can also exit through the open stomata where the CO2 is coming into the leaf. This is the main process of transpiration. Transpiration is affected by a few basic meteorological state variables. These are temperature, humidity, wind speed, and incoming solar radiation. The solar radiation, temperature, and wind speed, if increased, will all increase transpiration. However, the humidity, when that increases, will decrease transpiration. There are two types of photosynthesizing plant. They vary on whether they can open and close their stomata and for how long. They are C3 and C4 plants. So the C3 plant we can see here, this one can open and close its stomata, but while that stomata are closed, it can't photosynthesize, and thus it needs to keep the stomata open for much longer during the day. This helps to bring in more CO2, but also means that a lot more water is lost through the stomata. A C4 plant has complete control over its stomata, and it actually has a CO2 store within the leaf itself, this mesophyll cell. So this means that when the stomata is closed, it can carry on photosynthesizing. This also helps drastically reduce the water loss through the stomata.
Evapotranspiration is the combination of evaporation and transpiration. You can see evaporation happening here in this lake, and you can see the transpiration happening here from this vegetation. It's a crucial part of the water cycle as it is the only way that moisture is returned into the atmosphere. This moisture is then condensated into these clouds that you can see above my head, and precipitated back down to the ground, and the entire process starts all over again.
So this tree behind me is a deciduous tree, meaning that in the winter months it loses its leaves and they just fall on the ground and end up like this. So for 4 months of the year, there's no transpiration occurring at all. In contrast, however, this tree here is an evergreen tree, meaning that throughout the entire year transpiration is occurring. So here at Lake Thunderbird, you can see that the lake is probably 3 feet below normal, and I'm actually standing on the lake bed here. Now, about 4 weeks ago, the lake was probably 6 feet below what we'd expect it to be. And although the lake is a lake that's quite big water for Norman, in reality, the evaporation and transpiration from the surrounding trees will affect the amount of water that ends up here in the first place. Both evaporation and transpiration make up a significant portion of the surface energy budget. In regions with both moist soil and significant vegetation, evapotranspiration is likely to lead to a significant latent heat flux and a much lower central heat flux. This can mean that in regions with dry, bare soil, maximum daytime temperatures in the boundary layer can be much higher than over vegetated regions. Any water that isn't intercepted by plants and or vegetation and evaporated and transpired into the atmosphere, or caught in groundwater storage mechanisms or soil moisture, ends up as surface runoff into streams and creeks like this one. Here it will flow downstream and is either used for irrigation purposes or industry, and before it eventually flows out into the ocean.
This is a flux stat. It's one of the methods we use to measure evapotranspiration. It does this by measuring all the components of the energy budget other than the latent heat flux itself. So it uses a net radiometer to measure the net incoming radiation, It measures the sensible heat flux and the ground heat flux, and then solves for the latent heat flux, which can be related back to evapotranspiration.
One way of estimating evapotranspiration is using remote sensing techniques. Satellite-based instruments such as MODIS use spectroradiometers to acquire images such as the one here. As you can see, the irrigated fields have higher rates of evapotranspiration than the surrounding ground vegetation.
Farm animals such as this can actually cause a significant change in the local evapotranspiration of the land. As they eat the grass, they actually reduce the leaf area that is available for transpiration and increase the amount of evaporation that can occur from the bare soil underneath. And actually, if we move over here, we can see this in motion. We have the very dense vegetation far back from the road, and there's probably going to be more transpiration than evaporation there. However, in front of it, with the grass that has been cut, there's probably going to be significantly more evaporation from the bare soil lying underneath than transpiration. In a field like the one behind me here, the rate of evaporation will be a lot higher than the rate of transpiration, just simply because the area of bare moist soil will be a lot larger than the area of leaves which are transpiring and shading the soil underneath it.
In conclusion, evapotranspiration is the combination of evaporation and transpiration. Evapotranspiration measurements have greatly evolved over the past 70 years, and it is understood as a very important process within the hydrological cycle to replenish water to the atmosphere. Evapotranspiration measurements become even more important when we see longer dry and wet periods, as well as dead to alive vegetation in any certain area. As evapotranspiration is better understood as a key part of the hydrological cycle, we will need to have better measurements of evapotranspiration to be able to predict drought and flood times, as well as how much water will be available in the atmosphere. This is key to make sure that we are able to be prepared in the future for what the hydrological cycle may bring us.